Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is Austin here with some StarCraft 2 commentary. This is going to be episode 3. And so, of course, the past two videos have been episodes 5 and 6, respectively. This is because they were originally created for my old channel, AUS772. 7772, sorry, 3 sevens. And I made that into my personal viewing channel. This new channel, AUS77SC, is for my broadcasts, and it's more optimized for viewers rather than my viewing, as I had many subscriptions on my old channel and different bothering presences. And so now this is an entirely broadcast-based channel, and as you may know, it is a send-in based YouTube system. So if you send your replays to AUS77SC@gmail.com, and I broadcast these replays. And you may ask, is this replay sent in? No. It is my brother's. It is blind, though. I have no idea of how it pans out. I just randomly took it from one of his replays. And so I believe this is Silver League. And to introduce your players, we have KillerGB as the red Terran, his partner, the blue Terran, SAMiR, the purple Zerg, Conrad, that is my brother, and Skitn, who I will call Skit, who is the teal Protoss. And so this is going to be Magma Core, and of course a 2v2. And so as our game gets underway, of course nothing too interesting. I'd just like to make a special shout out though to Half Decent Gaming. That is Matt to me. He is a fellow commentator of mine that is on the main page of my channel at the bottom, and I'd just like you to just pay him a visit. He's a very supportive of my efforts, and I'd just like to say a special thank you to that. And so don't be afraid to send in your replays to be broadcast. By the way, I much appreciate anything I receive. I've yet to receive one, and so it goes a very long way in terms of appreciation. And so Skitn here, getting the traditional gate and scouting underway from Conrad. And so, not sure how he's scouted this path. Yes, that makes sense. Okay, with the traditional shift. And so the wall from KillerGB and the second barracks. I'm not sure if this was random. Skitn is indeed my brother's best friend, and so I know he's not a random partner. But I'm unsure as to whether or not KillerGB and SAMiR are partners. And I apologize if this is slightly lagging. I'm not sure why. My i7 is working just fine. Let's make sure it's just plugged in here. Okay, so I hope to not see any further lag. It's getting a little choppy, perhaps because it's a 2v2 and so much is going on. And so both players playing Orthodox and just the traditional expand here. A little late for Conrad and Skitn getting the first Scout Zealot and a second gateway. So no cybernetics core, so we can expect some early multi-gate pressure. Here's an engineering bay now for SAMiR. That is curious in my opinion. An engineering bay, so he's obviously going for a more tech route. I am not too versed in Terran technology, but I do believe, I'm not sure if that leads to any specific tech path. I will have to see. I do apologize for my faltering. It's just that I am not the most proficient in Terran tech. I cannot remember off the top of my head what an engineering bay does grant. Perhaps early upgrades for early 2 racks pressure. And so Conrad getting his spine crawler at his main to ensure no early pressure, and just several Zerglings as 2 forges being produced along with a cybernetics core for Skitn. So this is a curious strategy. He's not going straight into the warp gate tech, and obviously going for fast upgrades. So this could be an all-in, very early pressure or something of the sort. And the zone I get taken by Conrad here. And so SAMiR is building a second barracks. It is his second. His first is reactored. So reactored Marines. His ally has 2 barracks of his own and a factory, and now he will get his engineering bay. Orbitals finishing, 1 orbital finishing, and this engineering bay researching weapons level 1. So early upgrades for some Marines quick. We could expect perhaps some pressure. And so just let's look at Skitn's base. He's got 3 spread out pylons, and I used to be one for spread out pylons. I'm not sure. I believe I have mentioned this on this channel so far, at least one of the replays in it. I am a Protoss player, absolutely, but I used to place my pylons as such. But if an opponent destroys the 1 pylon, you are powerless. But if you were to place a row of pylons, it becomes a lot more difficult to unpower your opponent's technology. So a factory with tech lab, so no reactor Hellions, more of a siege tech play. Very orthodox play from both players. Starport for KillerGB, and a third barracks, and so this tech lab reactor, so early M&Ms, and now a factory, so he's branching out more into some basic Terran tech. And so this is curious, the 1-1-1 opener, or actually no, 2-1-1, I'm not sure that's an actual strategy, but he opened up with 2 racks, and with both tech labs, and then a factory starport. So he is indeed getting siege tanks, and now medevac, so no tech lab banshees or something of the sort, so just M&Ms being produced from both sides. And Skitn here, anything curious? No, both weapons level 1 upgrades and expansion, and no warp gate tech finished yet, so that's a very late warp gate, and just not enough structures. A Twilight's Council being placed here along with a pylon, but I find 2 gates producing out of gateway mode. I mean, Skitn has a number of things in production, a number of structures and researches and units, but that is great macro, but to have only this paltry a force early in this game and only 2 warp gates, you need to work more on your tech, from my perspective. And so here's that first medevac and a starport for SAMiR. So both players going into more of a all structures kind of build. No 2 racks pressure, as I would have predicted. A sizable force here for their army. And so hopefully we will see some harassment or something of the sort. As I said, I do apologize that this is a blind replay, and so I have no idea of the outcome, and I have no idea of the level of harassment, or if it's just a mass up and then attack kind of game. If it is the latter, I will most probably upload this, but then next time search a little deeper into my replays. That is why I wish to have replays sent in to me, because that allows for more curiosity as in terms of what happens, and I'm not and I can be generally aware of whether or not it is a high quality replay, in terms of not just being a both armies mass up and then attack each other and then one side wins. So here's concussive shells researching for SAMiR, and charge for Skitn as he gets a 4th gate. And so he has still a small force, but perhaps charge Vought Archon to deal with those biological M&Ms. There's a Robo, so I'm not sure I could put a name on this strategy. Not a charge Vought Archon, because he has a Robo now. And Banewing Nest, of course, for Conrad, and an Evolution Chamber. So a rather simple Banewing based build. 4 units warping in now for Skitn, and SAMiR and KillerGB massing now at the center. Well, just KillerGB. SAMiR's force remaining behind, and so I believe they should put some pressure on, as their opponents do not have too much, and this natural for Conrad is so exposed. Even though he does have that spine crawl, if you're a Terran player and you have those siege tanks, do not be afraid to mount them up on a cliff and just pick off your opponent's units. And so for Conrad here, we have a Spire and a Banshee in production now. That is going to be SAMiR. So those Banshees, if cloaked, will prove... wow. He has his 1 Spore Crawler now being built for Conrad, so I'm not sure if he spotted that. I'll have to check vision, sorry, if they spotted anything in their opponent's base. No starports or nothing. So I believe it is just by his own wit that he was able to realize that the Banshees are a possibility. And so here's a little bit of a push now coming in from KillerGB, and Conrad is going to get that vital surround on everything. And now, wow, not the greatest push. KillerGB is able to pick up his units, but Conrad now will mass at the center. And so here is SAMiR coming out with a not very well-timed push, as both Skitn and Conrad have larger armies than SAMiR and KillerGB. So now these Terran players are going to pull back, presumably behind their wall, to hold against an impending doom from their Zerg and Protoss opponents. So 10 Banewings morphing in, and yet another Banshee coming down, but I'm not sure, coming down, yes, I'm not sure if you are aware, but in previous replays on my old channel, I repeated the word many times, notoriously, in my first replay. And so, first Banshee finished, and 12 Zerglings, Banshees from both sides, and Cloak researching. I'm not sure if SAMiR has Cloak. He's the one researching it. So does his opponent have it? Does his ally, sorry, have it? No. And so these Banshees will prove essential. What does Conrad have in terms of anti-air? Mutalisks that have finished, but nothing else outside of that. And Overseers to perhaps spawn Changelings or something of the sort. But these just 4 mutas. will be the ultimate counter, but these Marines and Marauders will still be able to take out the Mutas. And so here is just a stream of Banshees along with Cloaking Field about half done, finishing. And so I like that mini engage, of course, not a real harassment. For most players, when you get to gold, I'm not in gold personally, I have not had any time to practice. Second Immortal, by the way, for Skitn, so obviously neither of them have any idea that Banshees are being produced. And so with school and such, I do not have enough time to practice consistently and be able to reach these high gold levels. But I believe that harassment is what separates gold league players from silver league players. No matter the strategy, you can counter it if you put on the right amount of pressure. And so here are some Mutalisks from Conrad, surely going to harass. And geez, this is just this sheer amount of mules. That takes an awful lot of orbital energy. And so these Mutalisks are just going to be able to hit this base, this natural for KillerGB, which is so surprisingly late, as SAMiR does not even have a natural. And so Banshees being produced by both, these will counter ground units efficiently, but it'll all come down to whether or not Conrad spots this. And it looks like Skitn has an observer, and briefly I will look at the resources tab. That see, KillerGB with his expansion has just so many resources streaming in, but SAMiR, who does not, has just a slower concentration. And here is Skitn getting that important vision on the natural expand. I don't think he will see these Banshees though, and it's such a stark force of them that, wow, it is just truly is he gonna be able to see them? They will be revealed indeed. And why is he sending Banshees against Mutalisks? Quickly pulling out a logical error there, and those Mutalisks are just going to chase after the Banshees. And quickly, the amount of Banshees produced, and here is Conrad immediately harassing KillerGB's army, but the Terran force is desperately preparing to push in face of this. Will they pull back or will they push? Two missile turrets going in alpha construction phases. And so here is the push from KillerGB, but again it is a split push, and KillerGB immediately leaves the game. And so I find it must have been a random pairing, as both the players did not make their push, did not coordinate their pushes accordingly. And now Conrad will just be able to stream in with his forces and potentially defeat SAMiR once and for all. I believe he'll be able to do so, and it will be Skitn who will be the difference maker. And so ultimately, both sides were able to transition well late game into their respective builds, but I found it was more of a massing up kind of game. I expected something a little more interesting in terms of diversity, but nonetheless, it was a pleasure to bring to you, and it was a neat game. My tips for both sides, well, immediately, the unorthodox builds on Skitn's part, that odd strategy consisting mostly of 2 gates, a Twilight Council, 2 forges. It was not an early pressure build, which would have been logical for 2 forges. And so, ultimately, the main issue for Skitn and Conrad's team, they played it well. They won in the end, absolutely. What was the main issue? It was more so scouting the opponent's strategies. They did not see those Banshees until the late game. Of course, some micro errors from KillerGB and the lack of coordination between the two in terms of when to push did play a large role in their defeat. But neither team really harassed. Conrad had that concentration of Mutalisks that proves so deadly against a line of workers. They will eradicate workers. And so ultimately, my verdict being on Skitn and Conrad's part, just watch the build orders and make sure you're able to put early pressure on, especially as a Zerg player, to be able to keep Terran players on their back foot. Scout tech, if you're a Protoss and you have an observer, make sure to get that key observer vision in your opponent's base, as I did in the previous in replay number 1 on this channel. And on SAMiR and KillerGB's part, just ensure that you coordinate your pushes, even if you are random partners, and focus more on pressure with those Banshees. They are a great Terran harass unit. Anyway, not to drag on this commentary, at least this personal notation, any further, I hope you have enjoyed my presentation. I will see you next time in episode number 4, and please subscribe if you can. I would much appreciate it. Send in any replays you have. visit Half Decent Gaming's channel and make sure you let him know that he's a quality commentator, and that to keep it up, and subscribe to him as well. So I will see you next time. Goodbye.